Okay, so welcome back. In this tutorial, we are going to be creating a simple toaster notification for our personal channel. So, for example, a user signs up, they should get a successful notification on successful sign up. Otherwise, they'll get an error if there is an error from the backend. The same applies to login, for example, and any other errors that may arise in the application. So, this will be a shared component, and we'll see how to hook that shared data into the state manager. So this is the exact demo of how things will flow. I come here, I want to sign up. Okay, so I can sign up successfully, but if I try signing up again with the same email address, I should get an error. Okay, so that's what we'll be creating. So let's get started. So the first thing I want you to note is that now in our shared state manager, we now have a new interface file. So this interface file will tell us like the name of our slice, alright, which is a shared slice. Then it will tell us, for example, in this case, our toaster can have two states. It can be success or it can be an error, right? Then we specify our toaster data. It can have a message, it can have a status, whether it's a success or error. Then it can have a duration, and this duration can be either 500 milliseconds, like whatever you want, all right? Then we pass it in to our shared state. So our shared state should have a property which is called toaster. Okay, so the next thing we are going to look at is a slice. Okay, so I want you to note in our slice here for the shared, we initialize it to an empty toaster object. And the reason we have an empty toaster object is because when the user opens the application, they should see an empty screen, no toasters at all. Okay, then the toasters will be added as the user interacts with the application. Everything else is as it was before, like nothing changes. All that we have added are these two reducers, this one and this one. This reducer is for setting the toaster data, and then this one is for clearing the data, all right? And then we export them. Okay, and then finally we export our shared reducer, which we'll be using here in the reducer config, all right? Okay, now in our reducer config, it's just the same as we did before. Our shared persist reducer, then we just specify the key as a shared slice, and then the storage is what we'll be using. What I want you to note now is we are using blacklist. Here we mean that we don't want to persist the data for the toaster because it's a very volatile type of data. It can change as the user interacts with the application, and it doesn't in any way carry any business logic. So that's why we just blacklist it. We don't want to persist it. Then I believe we explained this in the previous section. And then finally we specify that this persist reducer, it will be handling the shared reducer. Okay, then the next thing is now to look at the application store. You remember how we added our user slice to be part of the application store? It's the same. We just say shared slice name, and then we add our shared persist reducer so that it's combined with all the reducers of the whole application. Okay. Okay, the other thing you note is that we don't need to now have like actions for setting the toaster data. We don't need to dispatch them like specific here in the action names and in the action shared as we did before, because we already added them in our slice. Okay, so these two files, we will use them later on, but not at the moment. What I want you to note now is finally we wrote our first selector. So here I want you to take note of these two things. The first thing is this part here. Okay, what does it do? It tells us the state that we want to be working with, and in our case we want to be working with shared state. All right, that's why we have said this is the shared state, then app store dot shared slice. The shared slice itself has its own interface from the whole application store. So if we, for example, go and look at the app store, we should see that we have this, and it tells us that in this case the shared slice should be connecting to the iShared state, and the shared state has this. And this is what we actually explained when we were talking about the slice and how to set the initial slice. Okay, so I believe with our selector that part is clear. Now the other part that I want you to note is this one here. So all you'll be doing is exporting selectors. Think of them as functions which you get to call, and they return to you data that you have specified. In this case, for example, we are selecting our toaster data, and then all we need to say is from the shared state, okay, I need the toaster data, and that's it. Nothing else. Like think of selectors as just functions that you actually get to call. And one thing you have to do is to make sure that don't add very complex logic in your selectors. You can add very small logic like minimal logic, but don't add complex calculation in your selectors, because that will really maybe in some cases slow down your application. So make sure that your selectors, they, if in any case they need to handle logic, they have like very minimal logic. Okay, so the next thing we are going to take a look at is how we get to actually use this selector in our toaster component. Okay, so this is our toaster component. Everything is as it was before. First of all, we add our dispatch hook. Then the most important part is here. All right, so what this does is that it tells you this is the toaster data, but I want to select it from somewhere. Using the selector that we created, this one, we want to get that data and use it on our component. All right, then the other important thing I want you to note is this part here. The effect itself that we are creating, in this case the first effect, it has a dependency of toaster data. That means when the toaster data changes, you remember we initialized it to an empty object. When it's no longer empty, this effect will be triggered. Then when it's triggered, we can actually start now displaying the toaster at the bottom here. Okay, so the first thing is that when the toaster has a status, because we said it can be undefined or it can have a success or an error. So if it has a success or an error, then we set it as visible. Okay, then the other thing I want you to note is that this part here, we say like the duration. If the toaster data has a duration, then it will be picked. In this case, for example, in our actions, as we will see, we set a duration for success to be 500 and for error to be for success to be 5 seconds and for error to be 1 second. But let's change this one maybe to be 3 seconds. So that means that if we don't specify, then 2 seconds will be used as a default. Okay, then everything else is clear. But finally here we return this, so that we clean up the effect. We don't have anything that is hanging. All right, and then when the timeout ends, like we just close the toaster. Okay, then the other time we can close the toaster, and that's why you have this as a function, is when the user clicks the close button, as you will see in a few seconds. And the important part is here. Yeah, and the reason we have this is that we don't want to duplicate this part. Like we just have it in one place, then we call that function, that it can clear for us the toaster data. Okay, then finally we come and we see like how this will be dispatched, this action of setting the toaster data. So we come and we say in our success on the sign up part, all we need to do is to just call dispatch. So one thing you remember, we said that the thank API that thank callback provides is a dispatch property. All we need to do is to say dispatch. We pick dispatch from thank API, then dispatch, you can dispatch a success or you can dispatch an error, and that should be it. We will see in a few minutes. Okay, the other thing we have changed is the API. So if we go to the post of the API, we should see that we have now added something here. Like we remember we said that we are going to be adding a constant that makes it easy for us to connect to our backend. And that constant, when we open it, it's this. Like we say, if we are in development, we want to access our dev server, and then else we want to access our production server. Okay, and that's it. So finally we say, okay, now how are we going to be using this shared component? We have created it, we have added all the actions, we have added everything that is needed. Okay, all we need to do is to import it in the app component. We just import it here, and that's it. It should handle everything for us, because remember we have isolated all the toaster logic here. That means tomorrow if we say we want to change the look and feel, we want to add maybe a material toaster, all we need to do is to change this component and everything should work out of the box. Okay, as you can see, that's just it when it comes to creating your custom toaster in React Native applications. I believe that was clear. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you have any recommendations, also feel free to leave them at the comment section. Okay, so I think that's it for this one. Thanks, and until the next one.